Hi, I'm Russell Case. I'm here at Purple Valley Yoga. I am the lovely assistant to Harmony Slater, the certified Ashtanga yoga teacher running the workshop here.
Hi, I'm Harmony Slater. Obviously, this is Russell Case, and we're at Purple Valley Yoga. And Russell's going to lead us through a tutorial of the 9 Vinyasas of Surya Namaskar A.
Yeah. So I'm not a certified Ashtanga yoga teacher like you. I'm only authorized level 2. I've been director of Ashtanga yoga at Stanford University for 10 years. And I also teach stress reduction to classroom teachers around the country, around the US. And one of the questions I often start with, because it really comes down to why do you do yoga? And the question is, where do you feel stress in your body?
Well, I usually feel stress, a tightening in my lungs and maybe in my stomach.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. I normally feel stress sort of in my neck, and it sort of feels all tightened up.
Yeah, and shoulder.
And shoulder, right? And so many people today, they use a mouse or they use a phone and they get stressed there, but also you feel tight in the chest, you feel tight in the stomach. My mother would often get colitis, which is a kind of like a jabbing pain in the colon. And so
That sounds terrible.
it is terrible. She would have to stop the car when it would happen. So what we've just sort of neatly described is the length of the vagus nerve in the human body. So the vagus nerve starts here underneath the carotid artery, runs here into the chest, which is your anterior vagal region, and then down into the dorsal vagal region, and then it gets into everything. It gets into the groins and the urogenital pelvic floor, really down into everything. And so when we talk about say a polyvagal response, we talk about the happiness response or the joy response, which is why we would do yoga, which is that action, that filling of the chest and the filling of the stomach with air and the softening of the face and the jaw. And then this sort of total relaxation. This is what we call the parasympathetic nervous system in action. So what do you think it would look like if your sympathetic nervous system was in action?
Well, I think the sympathetic nervous system is related to the fight or flight response. So I think it would make you tight and like wanting to run away or fight someone.
Exactly. So this is what happens to human beings, is that they do very stressful things for a long period of time on a computer or driving, or they get angry, and they enter the sympathetic nervous system and they stay in it for a long period of time. And so there's a toxic response to, in the body, negative health outcomes for a long period of time when you're in this body shape, which is also a mental shape for a long period of time.
Yes.
So that's why we do yoga, is to try and get out of this sympathetic nervous system and make the parasympathetic nervous system more active, which is to say, to positively stimulate the vagus nerve.
And we do that through our breath?
We can. So that's one of the things that we start with in Surya Namaskar. We start with the breath. So how would you teach the breath?
Well, usually when I teach the breath, it's a particular way that we breathe in Ashtanga yoga. It's inhaling and exhaling through the nose, but it feels almost as if you're drawing the air through the throat so that you're making a little bit of a deeper sound as you're breathing. So you're slightly constricting the glottis at the back of the throat, which is a little flap that controls your ability to swallow versus breathe.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're engaging the throat a little bit, not in a way that is creating tension, but in a way that makes your tongue relax in the back of your throat.
Mm-hmm.
And then in doing that, you can control the inhalation and the exhalation better.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And do you do anything with sort of the bottom area?
Well, in the bottom area, we start to get into bandhas. And bandhas are these locks.
Mm-hmm.
Bandha is a Sanskrit word that means lock. And they're energetic locks or using the body in a physical way to create an energetic effect in the body. So if we want to talk about Mula Bandha, Mula Bandha is the root lock. Mula means root, and Bandha again is a lock, and it is connected to the pelvic floor.
Mm-hmm.
So when we first start practicing Ashtanga yoga, these energetic locks, these bandhas, are quite vague and difficult to understand and access, but there's some ways that we can start to focus our attention on the pelvic floor or the lower abdominal area, if we're talking about the next energetic lock or bandha, that can help to create the effect a little bit more as we practice.
So you would say that the breathing practice in Ashtanga yoga involves the locks and this quality of sound.
Yes.
Well, that's interesting because what you've described to me sounds like a way of stimulating a polyvagal response. So as you squeeze the urogenital floor and you breathe deeply into the chest and create sound through the neck, you're stimulating all of those areas of the vagus nerve, which is to say you're stimulating the parasympathetic nervous system.
That's why I feel so relaxed when I finished a yoga class.
Do you?
Sometimes.
I normally feel exhausted. So, one of the ways that I like to think about Surya Namaskar is also thinking about each vinyasa having its own little story or paradigm that controls and manifests its action. And so I think about, first of all, the neck in Surya Namaskar, because this profoundly moves when we're going through the sun salutation. Does that make sense? Do you feel like you use your neck quite a bit in the sun salutation?
Yes.
Right. I think so. So one of the things that's interesting as well about Ashtanga yoga is the Drishti. And so where the Drishti goes is where the eyes go. And you said this to me once. You explained to me what Drishti is. This is sort of it's a dris, I think you said? Drisht. It's a Sanskrit term?
Yeah.
What's that mean?
To see.
To see. Okay.
That's the root of the word drishti.
Okay, so where we see is important when we're doing the sun salutation.
Yes, because where you focus your eyes, then your mind and your energy also flows in that direction. So we're always finding a fixed point to set our eyes on, especially when we're in an asana, so that it helps to complete the posture, and it also helps to keep the mind very one-pointed in its focus. And then it also helps to direct our mind and our energy towards the state of the asana or towards the posture.
That's really interesting because I think about the eyes and I think about how the eyes are controlled in the body, and they're controlled by the muscles surrounding the occiput in the back of the head. Could you just turn for a moment? The other way. So, if you look here, this is the occiput here, this little knobby bit in the back. And so the muscles around that area, just below it, are called the occipital muscles. And those are the muscles that control the movement of the eyes, sort of like levering it up or levering it down are controlled back here. And so when I think about my own sort of neck pain that I have, I think about how that relates to Surya Namaskar and Yekam. So looking at Yekam, for example, if you're moving the head and you're using the eyes to move the head, think about how this feels. Try this. Lift your eyebrows, and then lift your eyes, and then lift your head, and then come back down. And then in turn, soften the gaze, soften the mouth, soften the tongue, take a little breath here into the top of the chest, look softly down, inhale, and then lift the chin. And exhale, come down. Do you notice any difference?
Well, I feel like when I lift my eyes upwards and lift my forehead, that my neck kind of crunches a bit more, and that most of the upward sensation is a movement of the neck alone. And then when I keep my focus or drishti downwards towards my nose, then I feel like the chest lifts more before the head goes back, and that the muscles of the neck remain a bit more supportive. Like my head just isn't hanging off of or hinging off of my neck. Rather, it's being supported by the muscles of my back more.
That's interesting. I've heard you mention that in back bends, that you'll do back bending with a kind of isometric contraction of both sides of the body. The back bend is controlled all the way through. So with Yekam, again, as Pattabhi Jois might say, Yekam, as with Yekam, lifting the chin and starting it with the breath, initiating Yekam with the breath, with the top of the chest, inhaling, lifting the chin, looking down, and exhaling, coming back to neutral, to samastitihi, right? Let's try that one more time. So inhale, looking down, looking soft, and then controlling the movement as we look down. And then exhale, come back. Let's come up onto our knees for a moment. And Yekam again. We're going to use the arms this time. One of the things that I think is unfortunate about the arms is that as they come up, there's a tendency to use the trapezius to pull them up, which for me, with my neck pain, causes me some issues. If I can give you an example. So if I just use my trapezius to move my arms up, I feel like this is the tendency that I have. I have this tendency to raise the arms. What do you think that would do?
Create more tension and stress and stimulate your sympathetic nervous system.
Right, in my neck.
Yeah.
Which is what I'm trying to that's why I'm here, is to get rid of that.
Yeah.
So let me try that again. So if I use my arms to lift my chin,
I like to think about my pinky fingers coming together slightly more quickly than the rest of the palms as the arms are lifting. And keep a little bit more pressure on the pinky fingers as you lift the arms. I feel like that action of bringing the pinky fingers together slightly faster than the rest of the palm and pressing the pinky fingers together helps to create this rotation in the arms, which stimulates the upper back muscles and keeps the shoulders more relaxed.
I think I've heard someone like Richard Freeman talk about that. So sort of making an offering with the hands to, say, Lord Shiva, something like that, which I think is interesting, because as that happens, then that lowers the shoulder blades, whereas this raises the shoulder blades.
Right.
So if you're lowering the shoulder blades and then lifting the chin, then we're able to reinforce that whole neck pattern that we started with. Okay, let's try that together.
Okay.
Ekam, inhale. And exhale. Ekam, inhale. And exhale. Samastiti. Have you ever heard that Sri Krishnamacharya, he would talk about doing the Ashtanga Yoga mantra the same way with like a little open palm?
I've never heard that, no.
Oh, really? No, I heard that once, that he just leaves it open there. And sort of, instead of pressing the palms together, he just leaves it open. And that's interesting, because it seems like that's the same thing that you just mentioned.
It doesn't have to be a very big space.
Not a big space. Maybe I'm making it too big. Okay. So let's try Ekam, inhale one more time. And exhale, Samastitihi. Let's try that maybe from standing.
Okay.
Okay. So, we're here in Samastitihi. One of the things I like to think about in Samastitihi when I'm practicing, that's amazing. We have sort of similar feet. You weren't raised in the countryside. No. I was raised in the countryside and I was barefoot a lot. And I noticed what happens is that my feet never fit into shoes. When I go into shoe stores, they're too wide. And I notice you have very similar feet. I think that's interesting that when we're in the city, we wear shoes that sort of scrunch up our feet. And I've heard, maybe it was David Swenson say this, it's like a bicycle in a muddy road. And what you want is like a monster truck in on a muddy field. Like there's just a lot more surface area for balance. So I like to start that way. So, lifting the kneecaps, and then there's this whole piece here with Yekam where I like to think about, again, that bandha piece that you mentioned. Pulling in the bandha, pulling in the Uddiyana bandha, and so that would be pulling the pubic bone up, and so I can access that pelvic floor at the same time that I'm opening up the top of the body, almost like the two pieces are connected. Okay. Then, Yekam again. Exhale, Samastitihi. Yekam again. Exhale, Samastitihi. So, what I think that's interesting is that we've done this one action where we're pulling the neck back and then also pulling the pubic bone back. But then now we're going in the opposite direction, Dve. Right? So what would we do when we go into the opposite direction?
Fold forward?
We'd fold forward, right, with the pelvis.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So in the anatomy of Hatha Yoga, how do you pronounce that?
Hatha.
What's that mean?
Hatha means forceful or with force.
Really?
Yes. But it also is a word that has an esoteric meaning. Ha means the sun and ta means the moon. And so Hatha is the union of the opposites of the sun and the moon, but also the heating channel in the body and the cooling channel in the body. This is relating to the energy channels, also called nadis or little rivers in Sanskrit. But also it has this other meaning of forceful, being that we're trying to do something to create purification and movement of ourselves towards a higher goal or self. So yoga is really not just for our health or for feeling better.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just for our pleasure,
Mm-hmm.
but it's actually for our enlightenment
Mm-hmm.
or our awakening.
Mm-hmm.
But you need to do something in order to have that happen, is the idea in Hatha Yoga.
Work. You have to do
Work.
some work.
That's a little bit forceful.
It's a little bit forceful to make that happen. Okay. Okay. So some breaking out of the natural pattern,
Yes.
the lazy pattern.
The lazy pattern.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're about to do the opposite of what we've just done, which is that would be the
The balancing of the opposites.
balancing of the opposites.
Yeah.
So let's do that. So let's ekam, inhale, open the neck, pulling the pubic bone up, and now we're going to dve, pull the pubic bone back down. And then we're also going to do the same thing with the neck. We're going to pull the neck down. And ekam, inhale all the way back up. And exhale, samastitihi. So when I mentioned the anatomy of Hatha Yoga before, they mentioned this action, the nutation and counter-nutation of the pelvis. Just like this is rotation, counter-rotation, rotation, counter-rotation. So I think it's interesting to think about doing that with the pelvis, sort of playing with these opposites, say the pubic bone and the coccyx. That's something that you often mention when we do the Mula Bandha exercise.
Yeah, but it's about trying to bring the pubic bone and the coccyx together.
How is that even possible?
It's not physically possible. But it's so that you're not just sticking your bum out,
Mm-hmm.
but you're also not tucking your pelvis under. You want to balance those two actions.
Mm-hmm.
So when you think of the pubic bone actually lengthening down, but also the coccyx lengthening down, then
Mhm.
you're creating space
Mm-hmm.
behind your lower ribs in the back and more space in the front.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So rather than thinking of tucking the pelvis and pulling the pubic bone up, which pops out your thighs and makes your glutes squeeze together,
I feel that.
yeah, you want to think about your thighs back and the upper shelf of your buttocks down.
Mm-hmm.
Thighs back, upper shelf of the buttocks down.
Mm-hmm.
And balancing those two actions creates a firming of the lower belly. And it
Mhm.
feels like the coccyx and the pubic bone are trying to move in towards each other.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Even though they're physically not moving, there's just a sensation of that happening.
So it's sort of almost like it's drawing upward.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'd like to try that one more time, that ekam into dve,
Okay.
and then I'd like to show you something on the ground.
Okay.
All right. So let's ekam, inhale. Dve, exhale. Ekam, inhale again. Exhale. Samastitihi. So it's interesting, we've just saluted the sun. Now I want to show you the moon. If you could get into child pose for just a moment. So this child pose is interesting. When I think about the length of it, and I think about even adjusting it, it starts here back in your coccyx and then runs the length of your sacrum, runs down the lumbar and then the thoracic spine all the way to the atlas, which is at the top of your spinal cord, and then the occiput again. I think about this whole length, and to me it looks like a half moon. It's like a semicircle. And so here's this semicircle in dve, which is the opposite of what we just did in yekam, which was saluting the sun. What I think is interesting also about this is that there's nothing really more to do here. Do you feel like there's more space that I could make with you?
No.
Okay. So that's really finished, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's try Paschimottanasana. Now, Paschimottanasana is really very similar to Dve. So, for example, if your palms were here against the floor, this would be Dve, right? So, again, here we are in a posture that's very similar to Dve. I'm just going to put those back. And again, I'm here, I'm looking at the full length of your spine, and what I see is a semicircle. I see the moon here. This is one big semicircle. And there's really, when I look at it, not much more to do. This seems sort of finished to me. I mean, I could pull a little bit more here, and I could squeeze a bit more there. Do you feel like there's more that I could do here for you?
No.
Let's come back up to standing. Well, that's exactly what's happening in Dve, is that first we're nutating the pelvis, pulling that coccyx back, coming all the way forward, and then we finish the pose with the reverse action of the neck. And then we create a profoundly rounded little package, which I think is interesting, because considering what we're about to do in Trini and Chatwari, that all needs to happen for us to access the next vinyasa.
Okay.
Okay. So, let's try that again. Ekam, inhale, opening the neck, dropping the palate. Exhale, Dve, lifting the buttocks, dropping the head in reverse. And then just for good measure, Trini is again the exact opposite action of the neck, just lifting the chin. And then what happens next?
Chatwari.
Chatwari. So why I think this is interesting with Chatwari is right now we're in a perfect position to be able to move the feet to the back wall. And so what happens here is as you start to lean forward, these bandhas here that you've talked about, and you lift a little bit in the shoulders, that pushing in the arms, that length through the arms, and then that bandha here creates this little lift out of Trini into Chatwari. But that can't happen without that nutation of the pelvis. Do you want me to show you an example?
Okay.
All right. So, the ekam, Dve, from the pelvis, finishing the pose. Trini, inhale. And now that I'm here and I'm completely nutated, the hamstrings have to be long enough, honestly. So there has to be some work here to have lengthened the hamstrings for some time, because that has to open for the pelvis to fully nutate, for this iliac crest here to touch the femur. There has to be opening in the hamstring, and that takes some time, at least 2 weeks. So then you're here, my arms are down, there's nowhere for them to go.
Especially if you have long arms, I think it helps a little.
Well, it would depend on your proportions, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my arms at this point are longer than my legs. There's nowhere for them to go. So when I press, the feet have to go up. The pelvis has to go up. That makes sense, doesn't it?
In theory.
If the pelvis is fully nutated, the hamstrings are long, the arms are longer than the legs, the bandha is up, as you described.
I think also you have to have strong lats.
Strong lats. Right. So what we could do, we can create prosthetic lats
Yeah.
and also prosthetic bandha.
Only if you have a partner, though.
If you have a partner. Right. Let's do that to each other. So I just did a little bit to you. We'll just do it again. Dve, and then trini, and then I'm here as prosthetic lats with my knees and prosthetic bandha with my fingers. You're leaning forward, and then that just comes up so easily. I'm not really doing anything. I'm not lifting your weight, am I?
Yeah.
You think so?
Yes.
No, I'm not doing anything. I'm expending no energy at all. Why don't you try it to me and we'll see.
But you don't need help.
No, I'll just let you do most of the work. Ekam, inhale.
Dve, exhale. Trini, inhale. Chatwari.
Wow. You're not doing any work at all?
No, not really.
It's not very hard.
No.
But you're lifting my entire weight.
No, I'm not.
Well, who's doing the work then?
You are.
Wow. Let's try it again and we'll see if we can figure it out. Ekam, inhale. Dve, exhale. Trini, inhale. And then Chatwari. So, Chatwari, Inda Pancha. This is really more of a Pancha prep. But here at Purple Valley, this is basically how I do Chatwari in the morning. So, you like to talk a little bit about how we should place our hands for Chatwari. Can you guide me through that?
So in Chatwari means four in Sanskrit. So the actual posture is called Chaturanga Dandasana, which is the four-limb staff posture.
That makes sense.
And in the Chaturanga Dandasana, what I find very helpful, what a lot of people miss, is that they don't make their lower belly tight and firm. And so their Chatwari is a little bit uneven, a little bit loose.
Well, you mentioned that in Ekam.
Yeah, same thing. Like Ekam is Chaturanga Dandasana or Chatwari. So when you come to Samastitihi with your feet together, pressing the thighs back, lifting the kneecaps up, upper shelf of the buttocks down, your body's in a straight line here. You're trying to make everything equal. Sama is equal, Stitihi is standing. So in equal standing, coming to Samastitihi, everything is trying to be even. So we're trying to have even pressure down and up, back, on all sides, firming to the inside line. Also, even the back is trying to come in. So everything's trying to move to the center to find this evenness and this steadiness. So when we do Chaturanga Dandasana or Chatwari, it's basically extending the arms straight up and then just bending the elbows.
But my hands do move quite a bit at that point.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing, is that when you're in a high plank position, your chest is coming forward as your elbows are coming down. But you don't want this to happen. You don't want this sticking out.
Because
of
that
the chest
loses
and the-
all of that bandha that you had mentioned earlier.
Right, and then you're not in samastitihi anymore. You're
Oh, right.
uneven, unequal.
So in Chatwari, we want to be in samastitihi.
Yes.
So,
So it's like this, but horizontal. I'm not going to just fall down.
Let me see. I haven't done that in a long time. So just like, no,
No, it's too
that's
scary.
frightening.
Okay. So what you want to do is if you can take a high plank position.
Okay.
So here you want to really, lift the belly.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah. And fill in this hole.
There?
Yes.
Like that?
Like that. But then at the same time, what a lot of people miss is the energy in the legs.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to push your heels back.
Oh.
Now, you have a wall, like I can be your wall because you have a partner, but
Okay.
if you don't have a partner, you can use a wall and press your heels into the wall behind you,
Okay.
and that's going to make your legs active and
Oh,
energized and
those are
strong.
supposed to be straight.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So from the legs, from the waist into the legs, into the heels, it's a backwards energy.
Mm-hmm.
But then from the breastbone, it's a forwards energy.
Oh.
But then at the same time, you have to hold the belly in
Mm-hmm.
so that your body stays, fill this in, yes, in a straight line. So you're tractioning your spine here in Chatwari. Everything's nice and straight and strong. Your stomach muscles are in. Bum is down. And then all you're going to do is bend the elbows. Yeah, with the body completely straight.
What do I do with my
And
chin
lower
there?
the shoulders just a little. Yeah, and keep the bum down. And the chin is forward a little.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that looks okay. You could come a bit more forward. Your hands are a bit back. But keep your, yeah, that's better. Mm-hmm. Good.
But that's much harder than I'm used to working.
Yeah. When you do Chaturanga properly, it's a very challenging posture.
Mm-hmm.
It develops your arm muscles, your leg muscles, your stomach muscles.
Mm-hmm.
Everything all together when you're really holding in this nice firm line and tractioning the spine both forward and back using the legs
Mm-hmm.
and your chest.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I feel like I need a little break after that. I wonder if we could do maybe a Sphinx pose.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do that. So we're back to Samastitihi. Ekam inhale. Dve exhale. Vini inhale. And then Chatwari. So coming down here, something that I started to notice was just how wonderfully open your lumbar thoracic spine is, and also how much air you get in your ribs. I think when I first started practicing, I felt like my ribs were sort of felt like my ribs were sort of glued to my spine. And I couldn't open them and breathe into that area. And all my breathing was in my belly. And so this posture especially, I could sort of feel if I would work on it a little bit, that I could pull open my ribs just by leaving my elbows a little bit forward of my shoulders. And then pull my ribs in the opposite direction. As I pulled on my elbows, I pulled the ribs forward.
Like you're trying to pull your breastbone through your shoulders.
Mm-hmm. And then in turn, flexing the rhomboids, which are the two muscles behind the scapula. And as that happened, the heart started opening more, and I could breathe more deeply into the sides of my ribs. And then something like this Sphinx pose, could become a resting position. Now I know something that you like to do from here to get that wonderful opening in your lumbar thoracic spine. You sort of pulling the coccyx down, the pubic bone down. You create this sort of, I wonder if you could show it to us again, where you're kind of coming back into Chatwadri a bit. I don't know if I'm doing this correctly, but you're sort of pulling the heart forward of the arms before you even get into the lower back or the neck.
So if we're going to look at the fifth vinyasa, Pancha, or number 5 is the upward facing dog, the Urdhva Mukha Svanasana. And I like to work on it in a slightly different way than other people might work on it. From a Chaturanga Dandasana position, once you've created this traction and stability, I like to push back up into the high plank.
Oh, you do?
Yes.
All the way back up there?
All the way back up. And then keeping that traction and that pressure through the heels, try to pull the chest forward like a tug of war is happening in your spine, and try not to drop in the belly. So keep the belly pulling in and the chest pulling forward and the front heads of the shoulders pulling back.
Yeah.
Until the chest comes all the way forward and up and the heads of the shoulders come back. And finally then coming onto the tops of the feet. But even when you're on the tops of the feet, the legs are still trying to pull back. So there's still a tug of war happening here.
Oh, you're not touching there at all?
Between the legs. No, the thighs are off the ground.
Wow.
Between the legs and the chest.
I wonder if I could show the folks at home an example of just how open your lumbar thoracic joint is. Because it's just incredible how much you get into that and not your neck, not your lower back. Do you remember that Karndavasana exercise that we did?
Yeah.
Let me just...
This camera?
Yeah. So if you're here, Karndavasana. So what I'm going to be doing now is I'm flexing your pelvis, just like in Dve. And yet, this is how you normally get into Karndavasana, isn't it?
Yeah.
You flex this much in your lumbar thoracic
At least.
before coming down, right?
Yeah.
I think that's just a tremendously profound opening in your lumbar thoracic spine. Do you want to come back just for a moment and then straighten up? I don't think that would be possible without all that work that you did in Pancha.
Yeah, you have to really open your upper chest, your
Mhm.
upper thoracic spine
Mm-hmm.
in Pancha.
Mm-hmm.
If you only are opening your lower back, no use. So you try.
Oh. So
Come to it's high plank
high plank first.
and keep energy through your legs. So your legs are super strong, and now you're pulling your chest forward. Forward, good. Forward, forward. Front heads of the shoulders, opening, opening. And once the chest comes forward and up, and you see the shoulder blades have come together now, then you can come to the tops of your feet and keep pulling. Keep pulling, and once you're on the tops of your feet, your legs are still pulling back. Good, and the chest is open, and the shoulders are open. And then your lower lumbar spine is relaxed. Yeah.
Wow.
And again, the drishti, or the focus point, is down the nose tip in the upward dog, so that it's drawing the attention back to this Uddiyana Bandha. We didn't talk about Uddiyana Bandha so much yet, but this flying upward energetic lock, which is the firming of the lower belly. And so in the upward dog, as you're pushing the floor away, as you're opening the chest and the shoulders, the gaze is going down, and that creates a bit of a circuit energetically that pulls your lower abdomen in, which helps to support the lower lumbar spine. When you just let your belly hang out, all of that pressure and compression goes into your lower lumbar spine, and it can create a lot of pain. So you really want to always keep that lower abdomen firm so that the lower lumbar spine can have more space between each vertebrae.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
I wonder then if you could show us some of those bandha exercises that we did the other day.
So what if you're having a lot of lower back pain in your life?
Well, that sounds typical.
So maybe one way we could lower to Chatwari on the floor.
Okay.
So you want to try and find the same thing in Chatwari. You want strong legs, strong belly, chest forward, heels back, creating a even position, a steady position, strong position, trying not to break in your lower lumbar spine, but keeping it long, elongated, and using the legs. And then slowly just bending the elbows, coming all the way down to the floor. So now the floor is working to support the lower lumbar spine.
Oh, I see.
And then pressing the tops of the feet into the floor, you can just pull against the hands a little to bring the chest forward. So you're lifting the sternum, pulling the body forward, keeping the hands where they are, and drawing the rhomboids and the shoulder blades together. And still looking down the nose and just doing like a little cobra to start. And then you can press back on the knees and either move through a child's pose, which can help to relieve any kind of back pain here. You can even,
as a alternative to downward dog.
yeah, as an alternative to downward dog, or even just taking a couple of breaths there to be a little more nurturing to your spine, to that transition. And then from the child's pose, pressing up into the downward facing dog.
One thing I'd like to ask you about is, I noticed this especially when we were in this plank position just now. I had no idea what to do with my hands. And I noticed that sometimes you like to put the hands in a particular position, which I think is interesting because it relates to that opening of the neck that we've talked about.
Yeah.
So
One thing, you can really feel this in the downward dog especially, but if you come to the child's pose and you walk your hands as far forward as you can, and then spread the fingers as wide as possible, because as you mentioned in samastitihi, you always want all of the limbs on the floor to be as wide as possible to help with balancing.
Okay.
So spreading the fingers as wide as possible, and the little V part pointing forward. So that's going to be slightly different for different people depending on your fingers. But for most of us, the hands are then slightly turned out. Just
I see.
ever so slightly.
Just like the forefingers pointing forward.
But not exactly the forefinger, the V part, between the
Oh, the
forefinger
V
and
part.
the middle finger. So between your peace fingers,
Mm-hmm.
this V will point forward.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's just slightly turned out. And then you really want to feel this upper outer firming in your arm. So it feels like you're trying to hug a tree here.
We've talked about that before, haven't we? This kind of
Yes.
revolution of the arms. which opens the shoulders away from the neck, which is helpful for me with my bad neck. But then in turn, that counter rotation
Yeah.
of the forearms.
So you can take your hands with palms open,
Mm-hmm.
and that's going to firm the upper outer edges of the arms.
I see that.
Yeah. And then keep that, but just turn the palms down.
Mm-hmm. And then I've got this V here.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so that's really what you want to find in your downward dog position.
Mm-hmm.
You can even do that on the floor, right? You can open the palms, feel that, and then turn the palms down.
And that feels nice in my neck.
And from there, you want to keep the arms where they are and then tuck the toes under. And feet are traditionally about hip width apart, which is actually quite a bit more narrow than most people believe.
Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't want to open up like a V here.
No.
That would be too sort of open for the pelvis.
Yeah, you want to keep the feet parallel.
And that's going to help me create sort of tension in the bandha.
Yes, as we've talked about before at other times, this big toe mound is really important to connect to the floor.
Mm-hmm.
And then feeling that connection underneath the big toe mound,
Mm-hmm.
moving all the way up through the inner leg line,
Oh.
you can really start to hollow in that lower belly. So it's like an ice cream scoop, trying to scoop out the lower abdomen.
Oh, I see.
And then at the same time, you actually want to feel like your sit bones are kind of coming together rather than spreading open.
Oh, right.
So that you're creating a little bit of a forward bend
Mm-hmm.
in your lower
Mm-hmm.
spine, but only by using the bandha and drawing the sit bones together so that the inner leg line is firm.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the upper back, it's a bit of an opening or like almost a little mini back bend.
Mm-hmm.
So you're balancing again those two opposite patterns, the forward bend being an aponic or a downward moving pattern,
Mm-hmm.
and the backward bend being a pranic or an opening and expressive pattern. And in our downward facing dog, we're balancing those two patterns to create equilibrium
Mm-hmm.
in the body.
That's so interesting. Is that sort of related to, say, an Uddiyana Kriya? Am I creating any kind of suction or vacuum here
Yeah,
when I'm
just
in the downward dog?
Just in the lower belly though, not in the upper belly, not using the diaphragm. Only the lower belly is lifting. But here you're lifting the diaphragm too much.
Even in the downward dog?
Yeah, no, you want to breathe the whole time. So if you're not using bandha, then this will be out.
Because I can't breathe at all.
No,
then.
you can't breathe doing Uddiyana Bandha Kriya. So it's not Uddiyana Bandha Kriya, it's just a hollowing of the lower belly. You want to still be breathing the whole time. Yeah, at no point in the practice are we holding our breath. So we're never doing Uddiyana Bandha Kriya.
Okay, but now I want to get back to standing.
Yeah, so this is also very helpful when the bandha is strongly engaged. Then it's easy to jump and find that bandha at the top, which is basically the same position as the transition from Trini into Chatwari. Exactly. If you don't have the bandha in the downward dog, it's very heavy jumping forward. So the more you can cultivate that hollowing of the lower abdomen in the downward dog, the lighter you'll be able to be in the jump forward. The more the hips will lift up over the shoulders.
No, I could feel that. I could feel that pulling up with the pelvis
Yeah, so
from the bandha.
if there's no bandha in downward dog and you just try and bend your knees and jump, it's like very heavy and very difficult to get the feet between the hands. But if you are able to have a strong bandha, then when you jump,
Oh, that's fantastic.
the hips will just float up and the legs will just follow.
I noticed this in class the other day. You mentioned this to help me create that idea. You said, here we are in downward dog, and you said, I think it was to sort of high point. And what does that do?
Yeah, so if you're trying to find this Uddiyana Bandha means flying upwards. And it really does that. It creates lightness and lift. So one of the ways to find Uddiyana Bandha is in a downward dog position. You can lift up onto your toes here and then bend your knees.
Okay.
By bending your knees, you're creating the ability to hollow and suck in the lower belly more. Because when the thighs are close to the rib cage, more hollowing and rounding, scooping of the lower abdomen is possible, and it's easier to feel. So once you really find that hollowing action, that scooping action, then you can stay on your toes and straighten your legs again, and then lower your heels, and then you can really feel that in the downward dog, that hollowing. So just again, once you're in your downward dog, lift onto the toes, then bend the knees, and then really feel this hollowing, and also feel almost like you're sending your sit bones back behind you a little. Keep that hollowing, straighten the legs, and then lower the heels, and you can find that deepening of the Uddiyana Bandha.
No, I feel that.
Yeah, it really encourages a deep lift. And then when you jump forward, everything's already activated and engaged so that you can control the lowering. And this is an important part, actually. There's a lot of emphasis these days on doing handstands in the practice, but handstands were never really a part of any of this Surya Namaskar. But when you jump forward, you are doing a handstand. You are balancing on your hands. But it's not like a big fancy legs up in the air handstand. It's more of just cultivating that energetic movement of lifting the hips up over the hand and being able to control the up and the down. Because once you can control that part, the actual lifting of the feet up over the hips is very easy. Right?
Yeah, I felt that. I wonder if we could do a little exercise with that bouncing and that jumping.
Yeah. You want me to do it?
Well, I could do it.
Okay. So one way that you can find this is if you have a partner, if you have a partner, it's easier, but if there's a wall, you can also do it with the wall. But as a partner, you'd stand on either side and have somebody jump, and basically you're just here to make them feel safe, like they're not going to fall on their face, because that's mostly what everyone's afraid of. So he's going to jump and try and get his hips up, and then just go back to downward dog and keep going.
Oh, like playing basketball.
Yeah, it's like playing basketball. Catch and release.
You mean it's like fishing?
Yeah. Catch, release. Good. So I'm just a wall, really, so that he's not afraid to fall on his head.
Because I have to say that I make a lot of money off my face, and I'm concerned about hurting it at all on the floor.
Yeah. So we don't want that. But that's really the best way to start learning handstands, is just doing this jump and trying to see if you can balance and suspend there. And once you can do that, then the rest is pretty simple. You just have to lift your legs up or down, depending on which way you're going.
Oh. Well, thank you very much, Harmony.
Do you want to talk about the last vinyasas or no?
Those are redundant.
They're the same as the first. Okay. Ekam. Dway.
Ready?
Pancha.